They called her a relic. Too expensive, too disciplined, too military. Elaine Carter sat across from her CEO in a glass boardroom as he slid the termination letter toward her like it was charity. No one noticed the calm in her eyes or the countdown quietly ticking in the background. 12 minutes later, his $580 million defense firm would go silent, every server dead, every contract frozen. Stay until the end, and I'll show you how one woman's preparation turned humiliation into total control. Subscribe, and tell me, what would you have done in her place? I still remember the hum of the fluorescent lights when I first walked into Horizon Quantum Defense Systems 14 years ago. Back then, it wasn't the sleek, glass-walled empire it is now. It was a converted warehouse that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. They hired me fresh out of the Air Force, where I'd spent nearly 2 decades building secure communications networks in places where failure meant people didn't come home. At Horizon, they called me the architect, the one who could turn theories into systems that actually worked. I took pride in that. I designed AegisNet from scratch, the network that would later protect over 70 government and defense clients. It wasn't just code, it was muscle memory. Protocols born from battlefield necessity, built to survive attacks far more dangerous than quarterly audits. In those early days, I believed in our mission: protect national security, build technology that made people safer, and lead a team that understood discipline the way I did. Marcus Ellery, our CEO, was a visionary then, or at least that's what I told myself. He talked about innovation and loyalty, about how veterans like me were the backbone of this company. He liked to parade me in front of investors, introduce me as the Air Force engineer who built the core of our defense platform. I smiled through it all, never realizing that the same mouth that praised me would one day call me redundant. For years, we grew together. Contracts, expansions, awards. AegisNet became the company's golden child. I missed birthdays, soccer games, and anniversaries to keep it running. My husband Jackson called it my third kid, half joking, half right. Then slowly, something shifted. Meetings happened without me. New faces appeared. Consultants, analysts, bright young MBAs with polished jargon and zero field experience. They filled the conference rooms with buzzwords and talked about optimization, as if loyalty were a cost on a spreadsheet. My access to financial projections disappeared one quarter. My security clearance downgraded another. I asked questions. Marcus gave me soft smiles and vague answers. Just restructuring, he'd say. Nothing personal. But in defense work, nothing that involves access and authority is ever nothing. The real warning came when I found a draft job description on a shared drive, Quantum Systems Integration Lead. Every bullet point mirrored my own responsibilities, only the listed salary was a third of mine. The name attached was a 26-year-old graduate named Jessica Turner, straight from some Ivy League business program. That was when I knew. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were erasing me from the system I built. I'd seen this pattern before in government contracts. Remove the veteran, rebrand the project, claim fresh innovation. It was textbook. But the Air Force teaches you to prepare for every contingency. Never assume the field will stay friendly. So I began preparing quietly, line by line, code by code. I built in layers no one else would notice. Fail-safes, redundancies, contingencies. Nothing malicious, nothing illegal. Just insurance against arrogance. Because I'd learned the hard way. Sometimes the people you protect are the ones who pull the trigger first. The morning it happened, everything felt too calm, like the air before a thunderstorm. I had a systems review scheduled for 9, but Marcus's assistant sent a calendar change. Urgent leadership meeting, mandatory attendance. The message was polite but final, the kind you don't question if you've been in the military. I walked into the executive boardroom right on time, uniformed in the quiet confidence of someone who's done her job flawlessly for 14 years. The room was all glass and silence. A dozen faces looked up as I entered, mostly younger than me, most avoiding my eyes. Marcus sat at the head of the table, expensive suit, confident smirk, the same man who'd once called me the heartbeat of Horizon. That morning, his smile looked different, practiced, thin, and hollow. "Elaine," he began, sliding a white envelope across the polished table, "I'm afraid this is a difficult conversation." I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it was. "Your services are no longer required," he said, his tone clinical, almost bored. "We're making strategic shifts. Your role has been redefined under our new structure." Around the table, I could feel the subtle shift, the collective exhale of relief from people glad it wasn't them. One of the new analysts, barely old enough to rent a car, scribbled something in his notebook as if recording my downfall for a management case study. My pulse stayed steady. Training does that to you. When missiles are locked on your aircraft, you don't panic. You assess. I looked at Marcus. After 14 years, this is how it happens? A calendar invite? He didn't flinch. "Elaine, this isn't personal. It's about cost optimization. The company's evolving. You've been invaluable, but we need to streamline." Streamline. That word again. I used to believe it meant efficiency. Now I knew it meant elimination. "Who's replacing me?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "We're still finalizing that," he said, glancing at one of the HR reps who shifted uncomfortably. "Someone who can bring a fresh perspective." I smiled slightly. Fresh or cheap? A few people froze. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Let's stay professional, please." "I thought I was being professional," I said, still not raising my voice. "You're the one firing the person who built your entire defense platform." He leaned forward, that CEO charm flickering into something sharp. "Elaine, don't make this difficult. You've been compensated well over the years. You'll receive a generous severance." I stared at the envelope. Generous. I wondered what number they thought would make me forget that I'd kept their system secure through 2 cyberattacks, 3 government audits, and 1 near breach that could have cost them every contract they had. Behind him, the wall monitor still displayed AegisNet's uptime statistics. My system, still flawless. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I understand," I said finally, my tone flat. "If this is your decision, then I accept it." Marcus looked almost relieved, as if expecting a meltdown that never came. He nodded to the HR director, who slid me another folder. "If you could turn in your access badge before the end of the day, that would be appreciated." I unclipped it right then and placed it gently on the table. The badge clicked softly against the wood, the sound cutting through the silence. Marcus blinked. "Elaine, there's no need for dramatics." I smiled faintly. "No dramatics, just procedure." I stood, adjusted my blazer, and met his eyes one last time. "You might want to check the system status before your next client call." He frowned, confused, but I was already walking toward the door. No one spoke. No one stopped me. The hallway outside felt colder than usual. I could almost hear the clock ticking in my head. 12 minutes. That's all it would take. Inside the boardroom, they still believed I'd just lost everything. But in truth, the countdown had already begun. The moment I stepped out of that boardroom, my mind switched from emotion to execution. Every instinct I'd ever learned in uniform, discipline, timing, precision, kicked in. They thought they'd stripped me of access, but that system was my creation. I'd written every line of its operational core, which meant I knew exactly where its pulse lived and what would happen if it stopped. I walked calmly to my office, ignoring the stares. People sense when something's about to happen. They just don't know what. I packed my things methodically. The framed photo of Jackson and the kids, my Air Force mug, a folded flag that had traveled with me across 3 continents. My desktop still hummed softly, logged into the administrator console. I moved the cursor over the encrypted module labeled Protocol S. That wasn't its real name, of course. Its true name was Sentinel Lockdown, a self-protection system buried so deep within AegisNet that no one else even knew it existed. 8 months earlier, when Marcus began freezing me out of strategy meetings, I'd anticipated this scenario. I'd seen enough defense contractors implode after leadership purges to know what came next. Data stolen, security compromised, contracts lost. So I built Sentinel not as revenge, but as a safeguard. It monitored administrative credentials, command hierarchies, and authorization keys. If any of those were revoked without proper sequence validation, like, say, firing the architect, it triggered a total lockdown. Not deletion, not damage, just silence. The system would treat it as an act of cyber intrusion and lock everything until the original architect revalidated the sequence. Elegant, efficient, untouchable. As I initiated the failsafe, a faint progress bar began to appear, an internal clock counting down from 12 minutes. Sentinel was awake. I closed the program, shut the laptop, and took one last look around the office. On the far wall hung a photo of the team from our early years, smiling, exhausted, unified. That version of Horizon didn't exist anymore. Greed had hollowed it out. I walked down the hall feeling strangely at peace. A young intern passed me, nodding nervously. She had no idea that the network she used to schedule her lunch breaks was already shifting beneath her feet. By the time I reached the elevator, the first alerts would be popping up in the monitoring system. Routine at first, then cascading into chaos. When the doors closed, I checked my watch. 11 minutes and 23 seconds. The car descended quietly, humming like an aircraft mid-descent. My pulse matched its rhythm. Outside, the late morning sunlight felt sharper, almost surgical. I crossed the parking lot, dropped my box gently into the passenger seat, and started the engine. My phone began to buzz, unrecognized numbers, rapid-fire notifications. I ignored them. I'd built a career on responding to crises. Today, the crisis wasn't mine. As I merged onto the main road, a familiar calm settled over me, the same one I'd felt flying through electronic countermeasure drills in the desert. Control through preparation, precision over panic. Somewhere in that building, Marcus was realizing the magnitude of his mistake. I could almost hear the confusion spreading. Servers unresponsive, dashboards flickering red, engineers typing frantically as systems ignored every command. That was the beauty of Sentinel. Once triggered, it treated even internal administrators as potential threats. The only way back in was through the authentication key linked to my biometric ID. They could rebuild from scratch, sure, but it would take months, maybe years, to restore full client integration. And by then, every contract would be gone. I stopped at a red light, watching a family cross the street, a little girl laughing as she tugged her father's hand. I thought of Lily, my own daughter, and how she once asked what I actually did for work. I protect things that matter, I'd told her. At the time, I'd meant it in the corporate sense. Now it felt personal. I didn't destroy Horizon. I simply reminded it who had built its foundations. As I turned onto the highway, the sky seemed impossibly clear. My phone buzzed again, 10 missed calls. I silenced it. The countdown was nearly complete. Somewhere behind me, the lights in Marcus's empire were going dark one by one, and all I could think was how quiet justice could sound when it finally arrived. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Sentinel had done its work. Horizon's entire network, production servers, client dashboards, satellite relays, had folded inward like a dying star. What had taken 14 years to build went silent in under 12 minutes. I left my box of office relics on the kitchen counter and turned on the news. Nothing yet. That would change soon. Crises in the defense sector move fast once clients realize their data streams have gone dead. I poured myself a glass of water and looked around the house. Everything felt strangely normal. Lily's soccer cleats by the door, Jackson's coffee mug on the table, the faint hum of the refrigerator. I'd spent years worrying about losing this piece to overwork, but it turned out the real threat had always been the people I worked for. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Unrecognized numbers. I let it buzz on the counter until it gave up. When you've flown missions over hostile zones, a phone vibrating doesn't even rank as tension. I changed into jeans, ordered pizza from the place Lily liked, and sat at the table flipping through her college application drafts. She wanted to major in computer science, maybe teach someday. That thought made me smile. Upstairs, her laughter drifted down as she joined a study call with friends. In that moment, while an empire melted 6 miles away, my home felt like a fortress, quiet, ordinary, safe. At 5:42 p.m., my phone lit up again. Amanda, our operations director. I didn't answer. Then Kevin. Still no. They'd call again, and I'd let them sit in that panic a little longer. They needed to understand that what they'd dismissed as too expensive had actually been priceless. By now, the panic would be absolute. Emergency alerts flashing, contract partners demanding updates, investors flooding Marcus's inbox with angry questions. I could picture it vividly. The once confident CEO pacing that pristine boardroom, tie loosened, voice rising as he barked orders at people who could no longer save him. The irony was that Sentinel hadn't broken anything. It had simply followed its rules. Remove the authorized architect and the system protects itself. Nothing personal, just logic. Around 6, the first alert crawled across the local news ticker. Major defense contractor reports system, outage affecting global clients. I muted the television. They downplay it, call it a temporary technical malfunction. But those of us who've lived inside real crisis know the truth. The first lie is always the word temporary. The door opened quietly. Jackson came in, still in his scrubs from the clinic, tired but smiling. "You're home early," he said, dropping his keys in the bowl. "Something happen at work?" "Something like that," I said. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay." I kissed his cheek and handed him a slice of pizza. "Just adjusting to new opportunities." He laughed, assuming I was joking, and for a second, I almost joined him. Outside, the evening settled softly over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on. I leaned against the counter and finally looked at my phone again. 31 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and one text from an unknown number that simply read, "We need you. Please call." I powered it off. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The world was learning in real time what happens when integrity becomes inconvenient to power. It was almost 7 when the knock came, firm and deliberate, not the hesitant kind of a neighbor or delivery driver. I checked the window and saw 2 figures standing on the porch, Amanda and Derek, their expressions tense and exhausted. I took a long breath, straightened my sleeves, and opened the door just wide enough to see their faces. Amanda's composure cracked just slightly, the way only someone with military training recognizes under pressure. "Elaine, we need to talk," she said. "It's critical." "Strange," I replied calmly. "Last I checked, my employment was terminated at 4:30. Derek ran a hand through his hair, eyes red-rimmed. "Please, this isn't about the termination. The company's down, completely down." I folded my arms. "Then maybe you should talk to your new integration lead." "Elaine," Amanda said softly, stepping forward, "this isn't a joke. AegisNet is in full lockdown. Servers are unresponsive. Clients are threatening legal action. Marcus is—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Unraveling." I let the silence hang between us for a long moment, savoring the shift in balance. "Shoes off," I said finally. They blinked, confused. "If you're coming inside, take off your shoes. House rules." They obeyed without a word. Old habits die hard. Soldiers still follow commands instinctively when delivered the right way. I led them into the living room where the low glow from a lamp spilled over framed photos and a scattering of Lily's textbooks. I gestured toward the couch. "Sit." Amanda perched on the edge, rigid and professional. Derek looked like a man waiting for a verdict. I stayed standing. "So," I said, "tell me what happened in your own words." Derek spoke first, his voice trembling. Everything's gone. The network, the client dashboards, even the internal admin systems. The lockdown protocol is total. We can't even send status updates. That's what happens when you trigger Sentinel, I replied, keeping my tone mild. Amanda's eyes widened slightly. Sentinel? You're saying you built that into AegisNet? Of course I did, I said, walking toward the window. It's standard military design logic. When an unauthorized revocation of credentials occurs, the system assumes a breach. It locks down to prevent hostile access. I turned back toward them. When Marcus revoked my clearance, Sentinel did what it was designed to do, protect the system. Derek rubbed his temples. Elaine, this could destroy the company. We're looking at catastrophic losses, lawsuits, investigations, the whole thing. I let him talk, the desperation pouring out in waves. Amanda cut in, more direct. Can it be undone? I tilted my head. That depends. Proper authorization must be re-established by the system's original architect. Which is you, she said quietly. I nodded. That's right. She exchanged a glance with Derek. Then we need you back. Tonight. I smiled, not kindly. I don't take orders from Horizon anymore. If Marcus wants his system back, he can ask for it himself. Derek frowned. He'll never. He will, I interrupted. Because right now, his investors are on the phone asking why half their classified infrastructure just went dark. He's run out of PR spin. Amanda exhaled slowly, then pulled out her phone. I'll call him. I didn't stop her. The line rang for what felt like forever. Then faintly, Marcus's voice came through the speaker, strained, angry, afraid. Amanda, is she there? Can she fix this? Amanda looked at me. I nodded once. She's here, Amanda said, and she can fix it. But you need to come here, in person. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Fine, I'm on my way. The call ended abruptly. Amanda slipped the phone back into her pocket and stared at me. He's coming. Good, I said, lowering myself into a chair opposite them. We'll give him a proper debrief. For several minutes, the room was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. I thought about how many times I'd sat across from these two in project briefings, walking them through protocols, contingency plans, and defense mechanisms. They'd always listened politely, but never really understood. Now, sitting in my living room with their entire company on life support, they finally did. At 7:26, headlights swept across the front window, the sound of tires skidding against gravel followed by an engine shutting off. Amanda straightened. Derek swallowed hard. I didn't move. I simply waited as hurried footsteps climbed the porch steps and another louder knock rattled the door. Don't answer it yet, I said softly. Let him feel the uncertainty for a moment. Amanda hesitated, then nodded. In war, timing is everything. And this battle wasn't over. It was just about to begin. The next knock nearly shook the frame off its hinges. I opened the door just enough to see Marcus standing there, face pale, suit wrinkled, eyes wild. The self-assured CEO from that morning had vanished, replaced by a man watching his empire burn. Fix it, he barked, trying to shove past me. I didn't move. Good evening, Marcus. Rough day at the office? He glared at me. Don't play games. Restore the system right now. This is sabotage, criminal destruction of company property. Careful, I said, stepping aside slowly. You're making accusations you can't prove. But since you're here, come in. He stormed into the living room, his cologne mixing with panic. Amanda and Derek stood up immediately, stiff as soldiers reporting to a superior. He turned on them. You're both witnesses. She did this deliberately. Amanda's voice was calm. Actually, Marcus, the logs show Sentinel activated automatically after you revoked Elaine's credentials. The system interpreted it as a security breach. Derek nodded quickly. Everything's documented. Marcus blinked, processing. What security system? I walked over to the coffee table where my laptop sat waiting. The one I briefed you about 2 years ago. The one you ignored because you were too busy golfing with investors. His mouth opened, then closed. I turned the screen toward him. The dashboard glowed red. Network failure, client systems offline, legal exposure mounting by the minute. "See this?" I said, tapping the figures. "Each one of those numbers is a lawsuit waiting to be filed." Marcus slumped into a chair, hands trembling. "You've ruined everything." I leaned closer. "No, Marcus. You did that when you tried to erase me." I opened a folder beside the laptop, printed audit logs, emails, transfer attempts. These show you've been copying AegisNet code to external servers, selling access to investors without clearance. That's federal territory. He went ghost white. "That's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I interrupted. "You tried to cut me out so you could claim ownership of the system I built. You wanted the prestige without the price." Amanda crossed her arms. "And now we're all paying for it." Silence stretched. Marcus's breathing came fast and shallow. "What do you want?" he finally asked. I closed the laptop and looked him in the eye. "I want what's mine. 30% ownership of AegisNet patents. $8 million in compensation for attempted intellectual property theft. Reinstatement as Chief Innovation Officer. Permanent board seat. Public acknowledgement of my authorship." His jaw dropped. "That's extortion." "No," I said evenly. "It's restitution." Amanda's voice broke the silence. "Marcus, if she doesn't restore access, Horizon is finished by morning. Accept the terms." Derek added quietly, "She's right. 30% of something is better than 100% of nothing." Marcus stared at them, then at me. Defeat finally settled in his eyes. "Fine," he said hoarsely. "Draw up the agreement." I handed him the prepared folder, contract already drafted. He signed with a shaking hand, each stroke slower than the last. When it was done, he shoved the pen away. "Satisfied?" "Completely," I said. "Now we're partners. Remember that word. It means we don't steal from each other." He said nothing. I powered up my laptop and began restoring the network. Within minutes, the red lights on the dashboard shifted to green. The company came back online. "There," I said softly. "You have your empire again." Marcus looked up at me, hollow-eyed. "And you?" "I have what you can't buy," I said. "Respect." When I walked back into Horizon the next morning, it didn't feel like returning to a job. It felt like reclaiming territory. The whispers started before I even reached the elevator. People who wouldn't meet my eyes yesterday suddenly straightened when I passed. The badge clipped to my lapel didn't say employee anymore. It said partner. Marcus was already in the boardroom when I arrived, flanked by the same executives who'd watched my firing like it was entertainment. They looked nervous now, each of them pretending to review documents while the network hummed steadily back to life. "System restored. Full client access," I announced, setting the reports on the table. And as of 9 a.m., Horizon Quantum Defense is in full compliance with all federal contracts. You could feel the collective exhale. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to reassemble his authority. "We'll need to address the outage publicly," he said. I nodded. "Already handled. The narrative is that Sentinel performed a successful defense lockdown. The media is calling it a demonstration of advanced protection technology." Even he had to smile at that. I sat opposite him, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "You see, Marcus, sometimes the story you try to bury becomes the one that saves you." He didn't argue. Maybe he'd finally learned. The weeks that followed were a blur of rebuilding and redefinition. I was reinstated officially as Chief Innovation Officer, my name restored to every patent and document where it had belonged all along. The company began running smoother, leaner, more honest. People started coming to me with real questions again, not just to tick boxes. I made sure they understood what Horizon had forgotten. Systems don't fail because of code. They fail because of arrogance. Amanda became my closest ally. She managed operations with the precision of someone who'd seen both sides of command. Derek oversaw infrastructure, humbler than before, but competent. Marcus stayed on as CEO, but something fundamental had shifted. His voice no longer carried unchecked authority. We were equals now, bound by contract and by something heavier, knowledge. A few months later, we landed a government defense contract worth $200 million. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same system Marcus had tried to erase now secured our biggest win. He credited me publicly at the announcement, his voice steady but subdued. For once, the acknowledgement wasn't a performance. It was respect earned through fire. Life at home mirrored that calm. Jackson's medical treatments were fully covered under the new executive plan. Lily got her acceptance letter to State University, planning to major in cybersecurity. "I want to build systems like yours," she told me. I laughed softly. "Then remember this. Technology changes, but integrity doesn't." Sometimes at night, I stand on the back porch, watching the lights from the city shimmer against the horizon. That word, horizon, means something different to me now. It's not just the company's name, it's what comes after surviving the storm. They once fired me for being too expensive. Now they know what my value really costs. And I wouldn't trade that lesson, for them or for me, for any paycheck on earth. Looking back, I've realized that revenge was never really the point. It was accountability. When people betray you, it's not always out of hatred. Sometimes it's because they assume you won't fight back. What I did wasn't about destruction. It was about reminding them that respect is not optional. The world, especially in business, often rewards loudness over loyalty, charm over competence. But real strength, the kind that lasts, is quiet, prepared, and deliberate. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I let the truth speak for itself. And truth, once released, doesn't need a microphone. It echoes on its own. Forgiveness is complicated. Sometimes you forgive because carrying anger is too heavy. But sometimes forgiveness looks like silence, the kind that forces others to face what they've done without you lifting a finger. Marcus lost something he valued more than money, his illusion of control. I didn't need to ruin him. Watching him rebuild under my terms was enough. That's the thing about justice. It doesn't always come wrapped in applause. Sometimes it just arrives quietly, like balance being restored. In life, preparation isn't paranoia, it's power. Whether you're running a company or protecting your peace, you build your systems, your principles, your escape routes before you ever need them. The world will test you. Be ready when it does. How to get started today. Review where you're giving loyalty without respect in return. Write down your non-negotiables, what you will never compromise again. Protect your work, your time, and your boundaries the way you'd protect a home. And when someone underestimates you, don't rush to prove them wrong. Just stay. Calm and let your preparation do the talking. If this story hit home, share your own moment of quiet strength in the comments. Subscribe, and let's keep building stories of resilience together.